What is Uncle Nene's Nerdcast? Well, if it's about sci-fi or fantasy, we're going to talk about it here. Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, all the new stuff. We'll dig into a masterpiece like Interstellar, and we will roast the space trash like Rebel Moon. Why Zack Snyder? Why? Most importantly, we'll laugh a lot, have a lot of fun. I have a lot of great guests scheduled, so join us for every episode. This is Uncle Nene's Nerdcast. All right, welcome to the show. This is Uncle Nene's Nerdcast. I'm Nathan Fletcher, your host, aka Uncle Nene. My guest today is a pretty special guy. Got an incredible story, incredible background in the sci-fi world. We love the long shot. We love the underdog. My first guest has a kind of his own hero's journey, and we're going to take you through that. It's pretty interesting. I'd like to welcome to the show Michael Stein. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I never looked at my life like that, the hero's journey, like the Save the Cat, John Truby's 22-step story structure, kind of writing for screenplays. But everybody's got their own thumbprint, so I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Before this, I did some research on you and tried to understand more as much as I could. So hopefully, I got it right. Mostly, we'll see. But before we get into your story, I always like to start with Star Wars or Star Trek. Do you have a preference?
Man, so I love this. You in the pregame, he texted me or emailed me and said, we're going to talk about this. I was like, ooh, my story with Star Trek, behind you, you could see a picture right here. That is a picture from Soylent Green. I was 6 years old. That was the first movie my mom ever took me to a movie theater. Everybody, like my wife's, her first movie was E.T. It's very, very wholesome and very, very nurturing. Mine was, I was like, why'd you send me to that movie? Why'd you take me to go see that movie? She goes, I don't know. I thought it was a movie about ecology. So it's where people are eating people. It's not.
Yeah. Those 70s movies, they kind of had this kind of a dark, very dark, evil empire kind of. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
So I've always been into personally, into sci-fi, like King Kong was like a personal favorite of mine. Also because of Soylent Green, I don't know, I've been had this fascination with the day after, a nuclear war, end of the world.
Right. Movies, yes. Yes. I love watching the world fall apart in a movie. It's great.
Yeah. War of the World. I mean, all that kind of stuff is I don't know why. It's there's a picture of the Baker shot detonation in the South Pacific, which is a famous detonation. We won't get too far on that. Okay. Star Wars versus Star Trek. So my first journey into Star Wars was in a drive-in movie theater in the Van Nuys Drive-In Movie Theater, which is also a picture behind me. And we went to go see Star Wars. It was 1977, I believe it was. Right? That's when it came out.
77, yes, I believe so.
And I don't want to see that. The De Laurentiis King Kong movie in 75 came up before that. And I was like, I just want to see the big gorilla. I want to see that again because I could understand that. I couldn't understand the space. So I didn't like Star Wars in the beginning. I couldn't concentrate. I had the ADHD. I couldn't calm down.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts to, if you really think about it, in Star Wars for a young kid. Yeah. So, but then Star Trek, I never watched a TV show, but then these movies, the Star Trek movies came out. And they were pretty good, I mean, William Shatner and Spock, those guys are actually really good actors. And by the time they came out with the movies, they were really good and they were written really well. Kobayashi Maru, you are always be my best friend. And it's just amazing. And then even the one with the whales is it's like the Star Trek movies.
Yes.
And then my wife, who is a huge Star Trek or Star Wars fan, she came around and we had kids and we started watching, this is the third wave of Star Wars movies come out, and because there was the first wave and then the one in the 90s everybody kind of gave a shit about, with Jar Jar Binks and all that bullshit, and then they had the new, I think the third wave. I think I really did it justice. I said I'm going to go back into watching all the Star Wars and give it a shot. And I will tell you, also getting heavily involved in personal development. Empire Strikes Back is like the first step towards personal development. Tony Robbins plays a lot of scenes from Empire Strikes Back in
Really?
a seminar.
Interesting. Interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about Empire, but it's my favorite from the first trilogy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Yoda, is like, that is why you
Hmm.
fail, and there's like so
Yes.
many lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
You want to learn about life? Watch Empire Strikes Back. Well, you got to watch all the Star Wars and look for
Yeah.
the subtext, and it's also written really well. So I started to go back in there, and I fell in love. So Star Trek was really my first love out of the two.
Okay.
The movie.
Interesting. Yeah. 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 Same thing for me. The movies is where I never saw the original series with William Shatner, right? It was the movies got me. And then, of course, I fell in love with Spock. Spock was my favorite character, and then I started watching the TNG series, Next Generation, and then fell in love with that. But I like both. I like Star Wars and Star Trek. I think I feel like the Star Trek universe is what we wish it could be, and the Star Wars universe is what it really is. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like Star Trek's very utopian. There's no money, we're just working together as the Federation. It's wonderful. And Star Wars is there's an evil empire and there's the rebellion, and so I kind of that's my
And
take
then
on
you
it.
got Khan, Khan,
Yes.
he's the evil, he's the, and if you get into Shatner and like his whole like vibe in the late 60s, early 70s, he had this whole cool, like he got into poetry and that whole vibe. Have you seen those videos of
Oh
him?
yeah.
And it's
Oh
so
yeah.
cool, and he's that guy,
Yeah. The
he's,
spoken word.
have you seen him interview Mike Tyson? Your Shatner,
Incredible.
incredible.
I really there's a show or a documentary called, I think it's called The Chair, and he interviews all the different people who have been a captain in the Star Trek universe. So, and I didn't realize he was such a good interviewer. He's
Yeah,
really incredible. Yeah, yeah, amazing.
it's
All right,
amazing.
so we dived in
We
on
can
there.
nerd out on that for a while.
Yeah,
I
we
will
could
tell you
yeah,
about
we
this,
could do that for a
but
while.
I
We
will
really
spare
could.
everybody, I guess.
I'd like to get into, your story as being a, 19-year-old stand-up comic in Los Angeles. And then, you, of course, early in life, you're on neurodivergent ADHD as well. And so I totally identify with that. Starting off from being a kid and then becoming a stand-up comic in 19, and talk a little bit about just like what that life was like, and how that, because it's, I think, unfathomable to a lot of people that a kid that could stutter and has ADHD and things like that, and then 19, a stand-up comic like that to me is incredible. So talk to me a little bit about how that happened.
Right. So I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders, and consider myself a long shot. And basically, I was an unplanned child. My mom constantly, used to remind people, "Hey, he wasn't planned. I ran up and down the stairs. I drank, I smoked, but he survived." I'm like, "Mom, they just want to know if you want rant or blue cheese. You don't need to tell everybody the
Yeah.
story. Plastic or paper. Everybody should tell the story." So my grandmother, since my dad made a lot of money and lost all the money, and I was the youngest in a family, a large family. So I had to sleep with my grandmother in the same room off and on until I was 9 years old. And my bedtime story was like, how she escaped the Russian concentration camps. So you like me lie. My dad was a New York homeless street kid,
Wow.
and he became, so you're lucky to, like, he didn't finish the 8th grade, but he started business when he was 13, so you grow up with these things. I'm like, I consider myself a long shot. I was born premature, ADHD. They didn't know what it was. I had a stutter. I had a focusing issue. It wasn't quite dyslexia. It was some kind of weird. I had to go to special doctors for that. I was put in a special needs school for knowledge school at UCLA when I was like 8, 9 years old. I was like, why am I here? Why is this kid, Down syndrome kid with named Frisbee trying to wail at me?
Right.
I was like, it was just weird, so I was like, the only thing success I had was making people laugh, self-deprecation.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I was good at that. So I took pride in that. My family was a bunch of fast talkers, and they talk so fast. And there's a large family, like, typical Jewish, crazy, family, and everybody talking over each other. And they're all comedians. And I couldn't, my brain was fast. And that's the thing that people don't know about ADHD. The brain works fast, and my mouth couldn't catch up with my brain. There's so many things you're
Right.
thinking about. So I would stumble over words. And I didn't really, and also I had a lot of health issues, and I didn't really have any success other than that, making people laugh. Other than when I saw the movie Rocky, like most American kids, I said, "Hey, here's a guy like me. He's not smart. They say he's not smart.
Yeah.
He keeps on trying. He's funny," because he was very frank. He was funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You always try to tell jokes, and I said, the only difference between this guy and myself is he's physically fit. So I said every day since then, so I was like 11 or 12 years old, I said, I'm going to be physically fit, start exercising every day. And by the time I was 16, I became a physical fitness trainer. I was like, oh, time plus effort, just like, it's my second
Yeah.
success. Okay. So then, I had a high school tutor, I wasn't a good student. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be like the calculator kid, like my dad. He sold all these calculators, and he became a millionaire. And I want to start my own business. And she goes, well, why don't you work with your hands? Because now they're just meant to do what they want to do. So I said, screw you. My dad never finished 8th grade, became a multimillionaire. Granted, he's living in a van outside of the house that he bought in Encino, but he was successful.
Yeah.
So started a business, failed, after a couple of days. So made like 2 sales within an hour and then never make sales out of that. It was summertime and I, just graduated like 2 days before. So I said, let me figure this out. Went to City College, took acting, took psychology, took business. And then I wanted to do stand up, but I was 19, just turned 19. And I said, I'm going to do stand up. And I brought a lot of people there and I did well, for my first time. But I said, I can't make any money doing stand up. I know comedians don't make money for a long time. But I brought a lot of people here, and nightclubs were really big in the late 80s. So I dance clubs. And I said, I could promote nightclubs. And within 6 months, I started a dance club called Off the Wall. It became, in 6 months after that, became the #1 nightclub promoter in Los Angeles, in my age bracket.
Wow.
And
that's great.
And that helped me, I started doing more stand-up. It helped me meet people. Like my first acting role was playing Dirt Diggler, and the Dirt Diggler story was a short film to Paul
It's
Thomas
funny
Anderson.
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I want to show the folks. I think you're 21 when you did this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm gonna show a clip.
No one's ever done this. This is cool.
This is you, right?
Yeah, look at there, long hair. That's Bob Ridgely, who was in the movie Philadelphia, lots of movies, and he passed away with cancer.
Oh, he's very recognizable. I knew I recognized him. I didn't know what from. But that's you. So you were fit. Yeah, you definitely were working out.
Yeah. That was I was a fit stand-up comedian, inspiring actor, nightclub promoter. I had a lot of energy. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, I had those. Look at the look.
Oh wow. So how did that come about? Paul Thomas Anderson, of course, incredible director, would go on to do Boogie Nights, in which you have a cameo on, and then he did There Will Be Blood and all these other amazing movies. How did you come across him doing this short film, which was, I'm guessing, shot on video, it looks like, or was that? Yeah, that was probably video. So how'd that all happen?
He was dating Elizabeth or Jody Goober. I was dating Elizabeth Goober, and he needed a ride home one night. And I walk out of the Goober's house and he's like, because he crashed his Cherokee. He got a Cherokee when he was 16 and he crashed it. And his dad's like, I'm not buying you a new car. So he's like, can you drive me to my house? I said, sure. And I had him rolling on the way there and we were making him laugh. And he's a funny guy too. Yeah. He's got a great sense of humor. A lot of people don't know that. And we just clicked. And then like a couple of days later, he's like, I got an idea. I want to do a short film about the rise and fall of a porno star, kind of like, a documentary style, like, Spinal Tap. And I said, I'm in, let's just do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Do it all. And
yeah, of course.
And we just became really good friends and we shot that. And then years later, he of course, he was destined to become a filmmaker.
I think 9 years, right, before Boogie Nights actually got made.
Years,
it was a while.
Yeah.
Now, I do have the clip of you in Boogie Nights, which I think I had no idea this was you until I did my research, and I was like, oh my God, that's a hilarious scene. So let me just show it.
What's the price for the 420?
I have this very unit in my home.
Really?
Yes, I do. You're still a little uncertain, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what you need? You need a test drive. So let me just pop in this 8-track, and you just give a listen and tell me what you think, okay? You hear the bass, right?
Thank you for your time.
I think that's, normally you don't think of Paul Thomas Anderson as having a sense of humor, but I think it came across in that scene. That scene, it definitely does.
If I was going to reveal a secret about Paul, he's got a great sense of humor. He's actually very funny.
Oh, that's great. So after Boogie Nights and all of that, I think actually, way before Boogie Nights, you did, it was a little after Boogie Nights, was Rituals and Resolutions. I have a little bit of that to show.
Wow.
Let's take a look at that, then have you kind of talk about what we see.
Sure.
I need to borrow some money.
How much do you owe?
17 grand. I owe 17 grand. It's past due and I'm flat broke.
You were asking me for $17,000.
I'll do anything.
Got a couple of problems I have to figure out, that's all.
Like what? What kind of problem?
It's a little difficult to talk about it.
Hey, Will, you know you can talk to us.
I'm getting married in a month, and...
Shit. Well, there's your problem right there.
But I keep getting these thoughts.
I love that line. Well, there's your problem right there. So tell me about this. I hadn't heard about it. It seems really interesting from what I could find online.
Yeah, that's a trailer to Rituals Resolutions. It's a half-hour short film, dramatic, dark comedy. And it's about 320 stories about people that have let their negative rituals rule their life. They all decide to try to kick their habits and become better people within, one night, but they all compromise themselves before the night is done. And there's a dark twist at the end. And that did well. That was my first live action short film. It got bought by HBO, won Oberhausen and Palm Springs International and many other film festivals. And that was my calling card to become a filmmaker and an actor.
That's great. That's great. And so, that was obviously well received. I think, most of my experience in production has been on the unscripted side, like reality TV, docu-follow. I've done a lot of that kind of stuff, sports comedy specials, things like that. Never really got to work in the scripted space. So you started off wanting to be a filmmaker, wanting to be a producer, writer, director.
Started off wanting to be an actor because I saw Jackie Gleason and Smokey and the Bandit, and I said, whatever Jackie Gleason's doing is the sheriff in Smokey and the Bandit when I was a kid. I'm like, I want to do that. And then, then I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And then, of course, so as an actor, stand-up comedian, I just started doing filmmaking. I was inspired by Paul because he was so successful, and while he was doing it, I said, well, I saw him, through those years after the Ridiculous Story. I was like, this can be done, and I, and also dating Elizabeth Goober and Peter Goober, understanding how movies worked, because I never knew the industry after started dating her and seeing this whole world of like Batman and Rain Man and all that. So I said, this is doable, just time plus effort again, like working out or anything else. Of course, much more difficult gear because it's the most competitive industry on the planet. But I wanted to be a filmmaker because I said that'll be a great way to become, just put myself in my own movies.
So there is something in the media business that very well called development hell. It happens, right? We go down the road trying to develop a show, and it never can come together, or things happen like that. You eventually find a way to work through all that in an independent feature film with Love Hollywood Style. And I'd like you to just talk a little bit about that, how that came about, and your journey in that.
Right. Good job. So you really did your homework. You're good. So this is his first episode, guy. He is killing it. Okay. So the Love Hollywood Style, I got close to a movie deal with Rituals and Resolutions. I had a deal with Trimark Pictures and Lionsgate. Robin Shore was the VP, and she's like, we're going to make your movie Underground Games, which is a gambling movie, underground gambling. It was a true story. I was when I was a nightclub owner, I started doing underground gambling casinos in Los Angeles. So I wrote a screenplay about it, and I got close to making a movie with them, but no deal. She left the company and it just fell through. And I've had meetings with Joel Silver's office and so many people. I can name it. It was a Tour de France.
Right.
After a year and a half, I said, I can't do this. I'm too much of an entrepreneur. I'm too much of a hyper self-starting person, So I decided I'm going to start a business again because I was a nightclub promoter, and then I just left it all. I was making good money as a nightclub promoter. I was like a mini celebrity, and then I was a production assistant because I wanted to learn production. That was my film. So I did that for 5 years. That was my film education. That's the way Paul did it. Paul dropped out at NYU because he'd be, So I said, screw it. I got to become an entrepreneur. And I said, I'm just going to sell. Remember that tool business I did for like 2 weeks when I graduated high school? It failed. But I said, I'm going to do something like that. But the internet is like, it was 1999. I started, looking
Oh,
for
wow.
ideas. And I said, I'm just going to do tarps because my dad's old business partner, my dad had a tool business in the late 60s. And before he started selling these calculators, it was tool business. And my dad left that tool business. And then he came back to it in 75 after that calculator business kind of, fell under after he made all his money. And then that person, his old business partner, is a guy named Alan Smith, who started Harbor Freight. So
Okay. Wow.
I've seen this rich dad, poor dad thing. And I said, I want to do, so my dad would like sell all these, this catalog of stuff. And I was going through the catalog of Harbor Freight and my dad was selling. And I said, I'm, you would sell these tarps. Tarps are just a simple item that a lot of people use for many different things. And I was broken in debt. I didn't have any money. I just filed bankruptcy because couldn't pay back for the money from Rituals and Resolutions. I didn't, but I built a Yahoo store, and I was as a production assistant, I started working after an 18-hour day, setting up this website. It started to make money. I didn't have to become a production assistant before. And I was saying, this is my film business. This is going to get me the money to do a feature film. And I didn't do underground games because I said, screw you guys. I'm going to do a movie that nobody would ever want to make. It's going to be a self-indulgent comedy that I would make when I was a kid because I love Kentucky Fried Movie and I love Woody Allen's Bananas and all that. And I loved American Beauty also at the time, that came out.
Okay.
So I wanted to make this dramatic, like over the top comedy. And that's what Love Hollywood Style was. Within 6 months, I made enough money to make a movie with, we casted Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, Coolio, Stephen Chbosky, Robert Picardo, who was in Star Trek.
Yes. Star Trek Voyager. Yes.
Yeah. And on all these other great actors. And I was able to write, direct, produce, and act, and this film about 4 intertwining stories about love and dysfunctional love in Hollywood, which is an oxymoronic. And it did well. It didn't make all its money back, but it did well, and it got bought by some places. But since then, I've taken care of the business that I've had, and that's what I am. I'm now an entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah. Let's take a look. I want to show
so good.
My rule typically is if you can watch 30 seconds of something and it makes you want to see more, it's pretty good. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, I'd love to see the whole thing. This seems interesting. So let me show you.
Sure.
Now, Walter will escort you back.
Wait a second. What was that last part? What do you mean I won't be able to remember anything?
Well, we can't have you back on Earth knowing what you know now.
Well, but a lot of people are going to know. Carol Ann knows.
Now, as far as Earth is concerned, thanks to you, it will be as if this whole thing never happened.
Will Carol Ann remember me?
I'm afraid not, Milton.
But that's not fair. I mean, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my whole life. And now no one, including myself, will ever know that it even happened?
So that was great. So tell me, what was it like working with, of course, the legendary Faye Dunaway?
Oh God. I was like telling myself, I said, Mike, win, lose or draw. This is like, we had a chance, she did have to get paid, but I said, I knew how to be an independent filmmaker at that point. Cause I did a documentary, before I did Rituals Resolution, I went around the country for 4 months. I knew there's some tricks. And one of the tricks are, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be able to get some good talent, you send out the script, and it did help that I did Rituals and Resolution. And I was coming off like a really good thing. But, I sent out the script and they said, well, she's busy. And I was like, well, look, I'll tell you what, let's dial back with them. I had my B cast and my A cast. The B cast was like, if she doesn't come through, I'll use this person. The A cast is, hey, look, if Faye's available, send over that script again one more time. We knew her lawyer. And I said, look, if she's not doing anything, let's do it. Let's have her play God, and I knew that would appeal to her. I said,
yes.
I said, it's going to be done very tastefully. It's going to be done with, with a lot of drama, but it's comedy, there's a lot of subtext in all this, because I'm a heady person. And she liked that because I write for actors, so she said, fine, 10 grand in a bag, 4 hours. I said, we're going to shoot everything around you at a studio. We're going to have a car pick you up, make everything easy and simple for everybody. See,
right.
Every objection was already kind of done out, and solved. And that's how we got Faye Dunaway. And what it was like to work with her, I said, Mike, I used all my, because I've studied, acting to this point, since Dirt Juggler Story, I started acting, studying acting every day, with Eric Morris and so many acting teachers. And I was really in tuned. So I got to play tennis, so to speak, as an actor, hitting back
Yeah.
and forth
Yep.
with
Yeah.
multiple Academy Award winning, heavyweight. And it was amazing. It's like butter, it's like a hot knife going through butter, because you're playing back and forth with each other, and then you're in the zone, and she's so good and so charismatic. It was wonderful. And we're on this set that's a white site.
And you weren't intimidated at all by her, or were you, just, it was fine?
No, oddly enough, because at that point, through nightclubs, the acting, and Paul was doing so well as a filmmaker, and being around Peter Guber and John Peters and all these people,
Yeah.
like, they're just people. And I used to have that notion, early on, but I've been through the arena. I said, I said, I deserve, this, I've done this. And also I knew not to go in there like that. You have to count your bookings. And Eric Morris says, do a Superman exercise. Eric Morris, great acting teacher. He's in that film as well, plays a psychologist, which is perfect. And so you built yourself up to a crescendo of confidence to where you can rise to the occasion, because I knew that was my responsibility, because I didn't want her to feel, like she was wasting her time. And I really wanted her respect. She actually started calling me Liam, which is her son's name. And she's like, oh shit, yeah. But that's the way I went into it. And I had these amazing angels behind me. They play angels, Robert Picardo, Ed Lauder, and Larry Drake, who were just amazing character actors. And I got to act with them before she came on, before the first half of that day. So I was like, and we were playing tennis great as well, because those guys are like so good. So we were, it's
so funny you say that, because that is one of the clips that I picked, because, for the Star Trek people out there, they got to see the Doctor. But it's a great scene. So let's.
I mean, why don't you zap down one of those Green Beret recon type angels or something?
It doesn't work that way.
Look, you got the wrong person, okay? I'm not a violent guy. Last time I got in a fight was in the first grade, and I lost. To Linda Pushkin. Somebody made a mistake. It's okay. It's not your fault. Somebody just messed up with the paperwork, that's all.
This is not a mistake. Didn't you say you wished you could do more with your life? Well,
I said I wanted to do more with my life, not go 12 rounds with the Antichrist.
well, all of civilization depends on you. Now you must take action.
Those are all great actors that you're surrounded by. Those guys, I've always, like, there's these, people that you've seen in so many movies and TV shows, and you're like, I'm not sure what their name is, but every time they're in something, it instantly becomes better, and those guys definitely qualify for that. I wanted to, talk a little bit about you had a role in organizing the promotional event for Batman. Of course, I was born in '78, so when Batman came out, I was like 10 or 11, and it changed my life. I'd already been reading the comic books because I was a comic book nerd. And so then when Batman came out, it was incredible. I, fell in love with it. And I think it's pretty cool. You had some role in that, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, I'll give you a really fun story real quick. It was such a great moment for me. I was 21, and I was up in Aspen with the Goobers, and I felt like a fish out of water, because I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. These guys, I mean, you're talking about a lifestyle. Took private Learjet there. We actually we had to stop and rifle and take Wagoneer limousines, and then Danny Sullivan put us on snowmobile rides waiting for us at Peter Guber's ranch. I'm playing pool with Vanna White, Barry Levinson, who just won the Academy.
Wow.
He's like, they just went for Rain Man. And I was like, this is insane, and I felt like, even though I grew up in Encino, I was in a poor family that grew up, but then the Goobers, and I didn't feel self-worth. So then I see my friend, an acquaintance of mine, Chris Peters. He's wearing a black leather jacket. I'm wearing a black aviator jacket. I'm like, I kind of feel like this guy's kind of like me. And he goes, what have you been up to? Because we're meeting at this Mezzaluna restaurant with the two families, Goobers and Peters. He goes, I said, I've been promoting nightclubs. I said, what have you been doing? He goes, I kind of want to get into promoting nightclubs. And I was like, ooh, ding, ding, ding. I find my self-worth. We sit down, we start having a conversation, and we get on the subject of the Batman part. I said, why don't we do a Batman party. We'll rent out the Park Plaza Hotel, which was the holy grail of locations in like Lesson Zero, which was a location that Robert Downey Jr. is trying to get. This is the holy grail of venues in LA, 4,000 people venue. And I said, we'll get that hotel. We'll get shirts and all your promotionals. We'll promote it for 6 months. It'll be the biggest movie nightclub event ever. And John's, I'm hustler. All right. I'm a hustler. And John.
Right. Yeah.
Peter Guber's, he's a lawyer. He's taken the bar, before he was, president at 27 for Columbia. He was a lawyer. He was a law degree.
Okay.
John Peters he's a street guy and he takes pride in that.
Okay.
So he hears me talking this, and I got like 17 people at the table, and he's like, I like this kid. He's like, what do you need?
Yeah.
Because I'm flowing, right? And he goes, what do you need?
Yeah.
Well, if we can get your Rolodex, and get all those people invited and send out email, he goes, so you tell me we get the Rolodex, you can get 4,000 people. I'm like, we could charge 20 a head. It'll promote your movie and all that. And 2 weeks later, we're walking on the Warner Brothers lot, and he's walking us around, and I'm meeting with the head of advertising at Warner Brothers, Rob Friedman, and And you're 21 when this is happening?
Yeah. Oh my God! Wow.
Keep in mind, I was in my age bracket. I was a top nightclub promoter in LA, so it was easy to get a lot of favors in the LA club scene. And then I got that venue. I got, Matt Dyke of Delicious Vinyl, who started that company. He was my DJ. But we had so many other things I could just go on and on. But it was the first time people saw the logo. So it said, there's Goober Peters Productions, right? So I said, Stein Peters Productions presents logo, the party. And that's exactly what they did for the premiere that was after our promotional party.
Okay.
Because we were promoting this 6 months in advance. So I said, Rob Friedman saw my invite, and he kind of used it, same thing. And it was amazing. It was a great time promoting it, being around that whole atmosphere. And that was a wonderful experience. And I always look at the Batman, like that.
That's great. Yeah. It's funny. When I was about the same age, 20, 21, somewhere in there, I started working in production when I was 16. So when I was 21, somewhere in there, I was already being put in like to manage different things and leadership roles. And one of the things that I did was we had a concert series. And so I'm running a concert down in South Texas on the island. And these are huge. It's a Spanish concert, but 10, 15,000 people showing up, and I'm managing the event. I'm in charge of the event, right? I'm paying all the artists, hiring security. I've got a whole crew that's doing it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it was so much pressure at being 20 years old, 21, and it was it's a pressure cooker. I mean, and things did not go smoothly. If you know anything about the promoting business, the concert business, anything like that, things don't go smoothly with artists, with security, with police, with everything. And so I can definitely identify with that. But it's a baptism by fire. I think it hardens you. You learn things, and then you take those skills elsewhere. So my hat's off to you for that. The other one thing I wanted to talk about was your Long Shot Leaders podcast. I want to play a little clip, and then you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing with this. Let's take a look.
How are you going to make sure that like every book is going to really have the quality? It's going to be in the stores. Everything's going to be like, how do you really get the most out of that book for that person that has that book? Promotion, advertising, everything.
Yeah, well, a big chunk of that too is Michael is actually at our writer's retreat. So he's there for the whole month. I pop in for about a week. So he guides everyone through the process. I mean, he is the number one book strategist in the world. So nobody knows books and publishing more than Michael Drew. So he's a legend in the space. So he guides everyone through it. He has a whole process and system. But then we also have editors and graphic artists to make sure it all gets done as well.
So tell us a little bit about what this podcast series is and what you're doing there.
That was a really good friend of mine, Davin Michaels, who's a New York Times bestseller author himself. Long Shot Leaders is like, I wanted to do a podcast years ago, and it's been about 3 years now. And I said, if I was going to do one, what it'd have to be something that is me, and like, I can't do anything, as when you're a stand-up comedian, in heart, you're like, you have to talk about what's you can't be anything else other than is you.
Yeah.
So I said, I consider myself a long shot. So I need to, and I feel like I've seen ups and downs. I can go through a litany of like so many ups and downs, but I've navigated out of that, and I find sustained success, eventually to where I haven't gone down again. And I said that would be an interesting podcast to talk about people that, you know, have been long shots that have started from, it doesn't have to be monetary, it could be any kind of adversity, have started from a low point and navigated out of that and have found sustained long-term success, whether it's financial, physical, mental, metaphysical, relationships, whatever. And that's what Long Shot Leaders is all about.
That's great. That's great. It's I think that's true. I know for myself, I started this podcast because my both of my daughters had grown up, moved out of the house, and I have all this spare time. My wife and I have our dogs, but other than that, we have spare time. And I'm a consultant and in my professional business, and so I have some free time. And I said, well, if I wanted to do something, what would I do? And it would be, it'd be a podcast about science fiction, fantasy, movie making, TV shows, all of that, because that's what I love. And so, it's funny. I think when you do something you love, it's very easy, and usually it works out better, so that's great. So before we wrap it up, I thought a few questions I think that our listeners would really enjoy. I guess as a storyteller, are there particular science fiction or fantasy creators that jump out to you that, like, I love their storytelling approach? Anything that kind of jumps out?
Well, you got to go with the granddaddy of them all. You got to go with Spielberg. I mean, he just knows how to, whether it's the vibration of the water or,
Yes.
it's just, he knows his Hitchcockian type of tactics. And he has what I would call at this point, when it comes to science fiction, unconscious competence, to where he has such a level of mastery when it comes to storytelling, that when you see his films, it is so insanely like crafted, in a sense that he knows the psychology of what a good sci-fi movie can do. So,
yes,
as my wife walks by me in the room, she's E.T. I was going to say that my wife watched her walk by, and I'm talking about it. We're a big Spielberg, and look what he does in that. That's Jordan fading back 3 points, nothing but net filmmaking.
Absolutely. It's like I never went to film school, but watching all of those movies over and over again was my film school. I just learned so much from watching those. Spielberg is one of the masters. I mean, Jaws. I mean, you can go on and on. I agree completely. Let's see. I guess, what advice for aspiring filmmakers or content creators? I think you have a lot of experience. You've been through the grinder. You know what it's like. What advice would you give them if you had, one piece of advice overall? What would that be?
Well, I navigated out of filmmaking and acting to become a full-time entrepreneur. So I would, say, if I could go back to do something, to have a long sustained career in acting and filmmaking or entertainment, first of all, start as soon as possible. Back to Paul, he was 6 years old in first grade, and he wrote one of his assignments says, what do you want to do when you grow up? It says, I want to be a writer, director, special effects man, producer. I can do everything. I will do everything. Listen to that. Listen to that. Tell yourself you can do, and also believe in yourself and start as early as possible. Anybody, as far as starting early, I've talked to so many people, on the podcast now, and when they have that early data set of knowledge, it's irreplaceable. So you're never too young. Start immediately doing something, whether you're in nursery school, whatever. Say, well, I want to do that. Let me have fun understanding that and getting into that, or whatever grade you're at. And you're never too late. It depends on what you want to do. So that's the first step. The second step is get scope of what, who you are and as a person, and always believe in yourself. That would be the second step. Third step is I tell this to everybody, whether it's out, film industry or outside of that, whether it's, just in life, get into personal development. People, they don't teach it in schools, and it's really ridiculous, because if you want to be able to be a better, person or a storyteller, you're going to need to know why people do what they do and why you're doing what you do. That took me a while, because I was a crazy person that was just like, if I knew that earlier. And that's why when I was 20, I got heavily involved in personal development, because there were so many question marks in my head. and craziness. So though that would be the first steps, I would say to you, don't take those lightly, take those seriously, and quadruple down on taking action on those things.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well said. Let's see. I think, one more question I think that it would be good is if you could direct or produce or write one science fiction or fantasy project in any universe that you know of, right? Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter. Is there any universe that you're like, boy, I would love to do a project in that universe?
I guess I can answer that in a weird way. First of all, I don't know, nuclear war film, is that science fiction?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I consider it's apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, but still it can be a part of sci-fi.
It's weird coming from a comedian, but I have always had, maybe because of Soylent Green, and I'm an 80s kid, and The Day After was such a big, thing for me, which people that don't know, that was a mini series that came out in 1983 that was about nuclear war.
Hugely impactful. I mean, everyone that saw it, it almost wouldn't air in today's world because of the ending. Too traumatic to a lot of people.
Right. And I think I have this terrible dystopian or whatever, outlook on, I'm a very romantic, optimistic person. At the same time, I'm very pessimistic, the yin and the yang. So I will say, this world is such a beautiful place. And maybe that's why I will think, not obsessed, but like I used to. And if I was going to make a movie, it'd be about showing the possibility of the darkness of a man's inhumanity to man, which will be, once, technology catches up with, man's, darkness, I think we're in for, some trouble. Now, I don't know when that's going to be, but I do know that, history repeats itself, and not to be so dark, but I think part of me would make that movie, like something that's never been made before, where the beginning, middle, and end of long before and, after, be, documented and, really try to, have a nitty gritty, no holds bar, situation that is extremely realistic and possible.
Yeah, there's a great series called Silo. It's on Apple TV, and it is very, I think, what post-apocalyptic, very close to what could happen. Basically these people live underground in giant silos, right? And they don't know how the world ended outside, but supposedly the world outside is toxic and they have to live underground to survive. And it's how does society change in that environment? And it's phenomenal. But I agree with you completely. Those are great storytelling because, humanity and our weaknesses and strengths get amplified, when tragedy strikes. And so it's great for storytelling. So I understand that.
I do want to be able to say that I'm so excited I still get excited about the Superman movie coming out July 11th.
Yes.
And I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying I'm so excited about that. I think that there's a lot of good, inspirational, people really bag on these like Marvel movies and DC movies, but you know what? They're getting people to go to the movie theater.
Absolutely.
And there's all different types of art. I'm a huge Scorsese, Tarantino. I love Paul's movies, and I think those are great. But then sometimes you want a burger, you don't always want caviar. So and I'm excited to see a lot of those movies that are inspirational, and there are, some subtext in those and lessons to learn.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I agree completely. So, Robert Downey Jr. being cast as Iron Man is one of the most brilliant decisions ever made. He is perfect for that. And, in the comic books, Tony Stark was an alcoholic and he has this path, it's like there's this parallel between him and Robert Downey Jr. in real life. And it was just, he's perfectly captured that. And so, I think that some of those movies are great filmmaking and some are not so great, but A lot of them are really good. The Avengers, the Russo brothers, what they did with Endgame, Infinity Stones, it was brilliant. I loved it. So, well, we'll wrap it up. Time is coming to an end here, but man, I had a great time. Thank you for coming on the show. And yes, this was my first recording ever podcast. So it was great to have you on. And, please let me know if there's anything you want to tell our audience about before we go.
Nathan Fletcher, great job. This is really great. Now, just you want to check out me, you can go to michaelsteinmedia.com. You can see, we have 3 podcasts out right now: Long Shot Leaders, Volator, which is my outdoor, products brand, and the DIY Not podcast, which is, DIY, projects and stuff, and Long Shot Leaders and all that. And you can go there and check that out. You can see my bio and all that. And yeah, that's it. And then again, I think this is you did a great job on this first episode. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Well, thanks. We will see you again, I'm sure.
Thanks.
All right.